Hey everyone, welcome. This is Jason Clemmons, Doctor of Chiropractic at the Rock Health and Wellness Center, and this is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. We are live right here from the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios on Facebook, YouTube, and X. We're live on 98.7 Walk by Faith Radio, 1420 AM Lubbock Christian Nation. We are streaming on 98.7 Walk by 987radio.com, and if you want to listen to us on your phone somewhere and you just want to listen to the radio, you can listen to the Live 365 app. It's the coolest thing about what's going on in the world today, that you just have the capacity to just reach the whole planet right here from Lubbock, Texas, sitting in my studio, in my office. Been working all day since 6 o'clock this morning, solid busy all day long. Been a great Monday, and I'm excited about tonight's show. I'm excited about this week of shows, and we've only got 3 of them that we're going to be doing this week. Tomorrow night, I'm going to be speaking at the WISE group, and I don't even know. I need to look that up because I don't even know for sure what the WISE group stands for. It's at Lake Ridge Chapel. It's something to do with wisdom. And Wisdom-Inspired Senior Education. That's what it is. Wisdom-Inspired Senior Education at the Lake Ridge Memorial Designers, the funeral home, right here on 82nd and Iola. They're right across the street from us. And it's great. Laura Landis runs that thing. She's fantastic. She does a great job with it. And we get to go over there and speak once a quarter. I think she told me we had 100 people signed up for tomorrow night already. So the room's going to be packed, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to go talk to those folks, share information. And of course, the way that we share it to them is different than the way a lot of other people share information, because we're always starting with the brain and the innate intelligence and making sure from a whole wellness standpoint. So we're going to do that tomorrow night. So I'm not going to be live. We're going to do a rerun show on an encore show from one of our shows last week that we're going to do tomorrow night about some of the information we talked about sugar and anxiety and all that type of thing. And then Friday night we're doing a memorial for my dad, and that you guys know my dad passed away, and we're going to do a memorial for him on Friday night. So we've got an encore show scheduled for Friday night as well. So, but I'm here live tonight. We got a good show lined up for you. I'll be here on Wednesday and Thursday, and I'm really looking forward to it. If you didn't get a chance to go back and check out last week's shows, we took health to church on Monday, and I really think, and I think that's what we're going to replay tomorrow night is that show. If you're listening to it on the radio, you might want to check that out tomorrow night as well, because we're doing the Matthew 13 verse 44 rerun show, and I tell you, when you find something that's so valuable that you'll go home and sell everything you've got to come back and purchase it, then you're onto something. And that's exactly what we tried to talk about with health. And so I really did think that was a great lesson last Monday night. And then Tuesday through Friday, we tried to talk about sugar and diet and anxiety and exactly, how that affected us. And so the Tuesday night show was a little complicated because we had a lot of data that we're trying to bring into one idea. And then I thought the Wednesday night show and Thursday night show, and then we got that awesome video of the Huberman podcast. And so the Huberman podcast that with Dr. Diego Borregas, and they talked about the epithelial neuropod cells. Man, that's some cutting edge stuff right there. That's just some good deep information about why we eat and how we eat and what's going on and how our bodies respond to our food. And there was just some stuff in there. So if you missed those shows, go back and check them out. I think it'd be worth it. And then tonight I wanted to give you a preview of the talk that we're doing It's pretty cool for you guys that are watching us on social media. There it is, right there: head, shoulders, knees, and toes. And so that's the title of our talk tomorrow night. And so we're gonna. I want to give you a preview of it tonight. I want to run through some of it, some of these slides that I've got, and I want to talk about. I want to talk about joint biomechanics because why and why does your shoulder not work properly? Why does your hip joint not function properly? Why is your knee bothering you? What is going on with your heel? Because you're going to go. I had one of my great people today. She's been going out of town for the last couple of weeks, and she flared up her Achilles, where her Achilles attaches to her calcaneus, her heel bone, and it was flared up, and so she went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Well, you've got a bone spur that's developing back there, and here's some anti-inflammatories or whatever." And it's just like, that's an interesting. The further I've gone in understanding the brain, the more I look at that foot and just am like, what in the heck does anti-inflammatories have anything to do with that foot? Why is that Achilles pulling on that calcaneus? What is the joint mechanism problem that's causing that Achilles to be tight on that calcaneus? And I know a lot of you guys have gotten to this point where you just would rather have a better answer to some of these questions. And so I think that's what we'll do tonight. We'll talk about that. And then maybe in the second half of the show, if we've got enough time, I really do want to start sharing the information about our neurofeedback and our brain mapping that we're doing in the office. And I keep saying I'm going to do a show on it, but time just keeps going by. And I really think there's some cool stuff that's going with it. And I explained it to a lady today, and she's been to multiple offices. She's experienced it multiple different times. And when I explained it to her, she said, that's the absolute best way anybody has ever explained that. And that makes me totally understand what you're doing. And wow, that makes sense now. And I'm like, yeah, it makes pretty good sense to me too. So anyway, that's the show. That's what we got on tap for you tonight. If you have a question and you got a comment or you got hate mail, whatever you want, send it to me, 806-794-0400. And that's our text line, 806-794-0400. Or you can send me a message on social media, and I'll try to get back to you. If you have any shows that you would like to, or you got any topics that you would like to discuss, send me a message. I'd be glad to put a show together to try to address the topic that you're dealing with. Sometimes these topics for me are super common because I see them every single day, all day long, over and over again. And maybe they're not so common for you, and maybe there might be an angle that you'd like to know about. So right before I got on the show, I just popped open my phone just to see what Dr. Hyman and some of these guys were doing today, and here we go. So this is a post from Dr. Mark Hyman, and it's the dailymail.com health, and there's an exclusive, pops up real big letters right here, exclusive: ultra processed foods do not cause obesity, says U.S. government's top diet advisors in bombshell review of current evidence. Studies have been biased, they say. And I could just see Dr. Hyman flipping out over that. And so he didn't flip out, but and it says more study is needed before any action is taken. Is a familiar excuse. Big Tobacco uses its resistance reforms, and now Big Food echoes it to stall action on ultra-processed foods. Fast forward to 2024. News just broke, and I guess I don't know if this was. It doesn't have the date, but news just broke that Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee members are taking a similar track with respect to ultra-processed foods and its link to America's chronic disease epidemic. Despite all the evidence collected to date, they are suggesting that science, wait for it, is not conclusive. Ignoring mounting scientific evidence, on the contrary, and focusing on obesity, they push the scientific ball down the road. That's the same thing. And then he goes on with like multiple studies about how it's all linked to obesity. And of course, we all know that, right? We know that because we understand the mechanisms of some of the mechanisms of what goes on inside the gut. And we understand that there's neuropod cells, there's epithelial cells that are designed to determine what kind of nutrients that we're eating and relay that information back through the vagus nerve to the brain to get us the information that we need so that our brain knows what's going on inside our gut. Yeah, it's a big deal. That's a if you guys are listening to the show and you get a concept of that, you can understand that, man, you can really take control of your health. I just think it's so inspiring to be able to know that information. Like, you mean the way that my brain functions has to do with what I'm eating, and I can actually improve my brain function by controlling the foods that I'm eating? And that answer is yes. You can actually do that. It's good news. It's good news that, and reverse engineer it, right? I can actually make my brain function worse by giving it food that it's not supposed to have. It's the same thing we do for. Remember that time I put that? I told you guys about putting diesel fuel in. Regular gasoline in my mom's diesel car, and my dad chewing me out and and telling me, "Son, can you read the cap right here? What does it say? It says diesel fuel only." And what does this say? Unleaded. He's like, "What'd you put that in there for?" I don't know. You just told me to go down and put gas in mom's car. So that's what I did. I didn't think about it. My brain wasn't working. I was about 15 or 16 years old. My brain wasn't working when my frontal lobe wasn't developed at that time. And so I put the wrong fuel in the wrong engine. And luckily it didn't ruin the engine, but it did not serve it good. We had to pump it all out of there and take it to a mechanic and spend some money to fix it and all that sort of thing, right? Kind of like our bodies, the same way. It's the same way. It's kind of like our bodies. We can put the wrong fuel inside our bodies, and then we'll have to take our bodies to a mechanic and flush it all out and fix it. And it's the same thing that goes on with our food. So you guys want to read that, you can go to Instagram, Dr. Mark Hyman's page, and he'd be glad to break it all down for you. So I'm going to get to joint biomechanics now. So I'm talking tomorrow night about joint biomechanics, and we just process it different, right? We look at things completely different, and we look at it. Remember, we detected correct subluxations, interference in your nervous system, and interference in your nervous system causes your body to malfunction. And if you're having a shoulder problem right now, then maybe you could think about some of this. And this is not finished; it's just a few slides. But the first part of it, in the concept of it, is really what I wanted to talk about. And the two things: tissues need proper nerve energy in order to function properly. When your shoulder is hurting or your shoulder is not functioning properly, do you think about that? Remember, I told you I was laying in the floor working on replacing my mom's toilet seat, and I was stuck between the toilet and the wall, and I was trying to get back there to the back of that, reach around the back of that toilet, for several days after that, I couldn't raise my arm up because I had this pain that was coming right down through my deltoid, right down the side of my arm, right there, and it was really painful to raise my arm up. Well, there's muscles that are moving bones, and those muscles don't move bones without being told to move those bones. Now, they might shrivel a little, they might cramp a little, they might lose the chemistry that's going on inside that muscle, but if you want to move a muscle, you got to tell that muscle to move through your brain. That's how a muscle works. It's the brain firing into the muscle to tell the muscle to contract. Okay? Well, we've got to have proper nerve flow. And we've got to have proper nerve flow from a global perspective before we have proper nerve flow from a segmental perspective. And what I mean by that is this: your whole body nervous system flow has to be working right, or your individual joint biomechanics will be at risk. You'll be in trouble if your shoulder's not in the right position, if your hip is not in the right position, if your knees are not in the right position. And so you need you need the proper nerve energy in order to function properly. But also, it's very important that we understand that the tissue needs a certain level of fitness. And it takes time to develop that fitness. And if you're moving through a range of motion on a daily basis that you're not used to moving in, no, if let's just say that, let's use a great example of just walking forward. A lot of us spend the entire day walking forward and not backward, but just walking forward. So we're just working in this one plane going forward. Well, almost never do we walk sideways. We never think about, well, I need to take a few steps going sideways until we come up onto a moment where maybe we're taking the trash out and we get to the dumpster and we gotta raise the dumpster lid, and then we gotta step over sideways to get the trash bag or something. Or maybe we're walking through the house and we step on a shoe, or we step on a Lego, or whatever that might be in the floor, and then it causes us to maybe move in a sideward direction. Maybe we're walking the dog and the dog kind of runs in front of us and we have to step in a sideward direction. Well, that tissue that helps us move sideways is not fit. It may have lost its fitness because we haven't moved in that direction in a long time. And it's you can find that out by putting yourself through some movements. I did that this weekend. I put on a pair of tennis shoes and they were a little bit dusty, and so I got a wet wash rag and I just was going to wipe off the side of that tennis shoe. And if you've ever tried to wipe off the outside of your tennis shoe by putting your foot up on a little step, like I have a little bench in my closet where I could sit down and get dressed, but I put my foot up on that little bench, and then I tried to reach on my left side, and I tried to reach down and wipe the lateral part of my tennis shoe. And I did that pretty easy going left. But when I did the same exact thing on the right, I had a really hard time leaning down and getting the lateral part of my shoe wiped off, because it's kind of an awkward movement. You kind of have to rotate your knee in, and then you kind of have to bend over the top of your hip in order to reach the outside of your shoe. And I just kind of laughed because I was like, dude, you're not prepared to do that move. And I had no idea. I didn't have any idea that I wasn't prepared to do that move until right in that moment when I was doing that move. Like, I hadn't worked on the flexibility. I hadn't done that stretch. I hadn't done that movement, and that will happen to us a lot when we do repetitive things. If we sit at a desk and we're so used to just that movement, and then this weekend we decide we're going to go outside and we're going to clean the flower bed, we can set ourselves up for trouble. If we're working in one pattern all the time, like a dental hygienist or a dentist, or maybe even a school teacher working, where the way that school teacher moves around the classroom is pretty much the same pattern all the time. It's easier to think on someone like a golfer that swings the clubs in one direction all the time. That wouldn't be so hard to understand. But there's several ways that we can there's several different professions that we can end up doing that, and we we can get ourselves in a position where the actual tissue loses a level of fitness. So understanding that, I think, is a really big deal to understanding how I need my joints to move, and how I need to understand that if I move a joint through a range of motion that joint is not used to going through, and I overload that joint with too much. One of my guys today said he was on a trip with his brother, and he had to take the luggage. He had his suitcase, and he was going to swing his suitcase across his body and put the suitcase in the back of the truck or whatever, the vehicle that he was driving. But he said, I grabbed the suitcase over here, and I swung the suitcase across my body, and I tore something, tore my labrum in my shoulder, I believe is what he said. And then that's one of the reasons that he had shoulder surgery. Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. He's a fit dude. He's a basketball player, super athletic, super fit guy, but tore his shoulder because he grabbed a suitcase and moved it across his body. And when he did, that tissue was not prepared to do that load in that range of motion. And that is one of the ways that we can hurt ourselves when we move. We can hurt ourselves by moving through not the wrong range of motion, moving through a range of motion we're not used to with a load that we're not ready for. And there we go. It could be that quick. So those are the two things. We need the nerve energy and we need the level of fitness. Let's see what this next slide is going to tell us. And then we got to get to this. We got to get to this really good thought right here, because the frontal lobes inhibit, because we're going to start with the brain, right? So tomorrow night when I do this talk with the WISE group, they're going to be so surprised, not really because they've heard me talk several times, but they may be surprised that I'm going to talk about joint biomechanics. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about the brain. And I think this next slide is the one I really want you to see, these next two slides. And if you guys are listening to me on the radio, come back and check this out. I'll try to walk you through it. But we're just saying that the frontal lobes inhibit flexor muscles. And I'm going to break that down tonight so that if you don't understand it, that you will. So what are the things you can do to drive the frontal lobes? Be social, get on your feet, move your feet, get your eyes up. Those are the things, those are some of the things that you can do. Take your head in that, do your pursuits, look at your thumb, take your head through that range of motion, turn your head, get your eyes up, and move through that range of motion and get that neurology going properly into the frontal lobe. It's very crucial that happens. But frontal lobe inhibits flexor muscles. So what is a flexor muscle? What does that mean when I say that? Because I've said it 1,000 times. So what does it mean that to you? And what does it have to do with my hip pain? Well, let's break down where all of the flexor muscles are. And my camera is covered. Let me see what that looks like. Nope, that's even smaller. I can't get my camera off there, so we'll just have to go with it. No, we can do that right there. There we go. So the flexor muscles are the muscles that make a joint close its angle. So on the front of the body, the SCM muscle is running from the base of your skull right up underneath your earlobe. If you just came right underneath your earlobe and you put your finger right underneath your earlobe and you touch that little bony point right there, there's a muscle that's attached right there. And it comes, just follow it with your finger right straight down to the notch in your sternum, that little horseshoe looking notch that you got right at the base of your throat. There's a muscle that's right there, and that muscle runs all the way from the occiput down to the base of the skull, to to the sternum right there, and it runs to the clavicle. That's why it's called the SCM, the sternocleido, which means clavicle mastoid muscle. That's a flexor muscle. Now let's move right below it. The pec muscle, the chest muscle, is a flexor muscle. Now let's move below that. The bicep muscle is a flexor muscle. Now let's move below that. Your forearm. So if you're just standing there with your palms forward and you just follow that chain, follow it from your chest to your bicep to your forearm. That chain, and then your SCM is in your neck. So your SCM, pec, bicep, forearm. Then come down to those two little notches, if you could feel them, those little knots on your hip bones, and right inside towards your belly button just a little bit, there's a psoas muscle. And that psoas muscle runs from your lumbar spine down, all the way down to the inside of your femur, your leg bone. Now you're thinking to yourself, you're talking to me about joint biomechanics, and why are you talking about this? Like it's confusing. Well, as soon as we get back from the break, I'm going to tell you exactly why I'm talking about it. So you guys stick with me. We'll come back in just a minute. This is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. We're talking about joint biomechanics, how you hurt your shoulder, your knee. You got knee pain, you got shoulder pain, you got hip pain, you got foot pain. What's not functioning properly? That's what we're talking about tonight. We'll be right back right after these messages. That psoas muscle is connected to all 5 of your lumbar vertebrae. You have 5 lumbar vertebrae. That's your low back. Your thoracic vertebrae is what's attached to your ribs. Your ribs are attached to your thoracic vertebrae, actually. Yes, so you got 12 of them. You got 7 cervical vertebrae in your neck. There's 7 bones in your neck, and then you have your occiput, which is your skull bone. So your skull bone, then 7 vertebrae, then 12 vertebrae of thoracic, then 5 vertebrae of lumbar. Then you get into your sacrum and your pelvis, your ilium and your pelvis. So let's just look at these muscles. And all of these muscles are basically above the waist, or at least their origins are above the waist, and they're on the front of the body. That's a crucial part of understanding. They're on the front of the body, right there. So let's say, could there possibly be any relationship between the way my neck is moving and the tightness of my SCM? Yes. What is the function? What if both of these SCM muscles tighten? What's it going to do to my head? It's going to push my head forward. So what's going to happen with my neck? It's going to get stiff. It's not going to move properly. It's not going to work like it's supposed to. It's not going to be able to rotate and move through a range of motion. It's not going to be able to go into flexion and go back in extension the way that it's supposed to. And it's not going to be able to lateral bend in both directions. If those muscles are tight and my head's in forward posture, it's not going to move through the normal ranges of motions like it's supposed to. What about your shoulder? So your pec muscle, just put your hand right across your chest, right up underneath your clavicle, and think about if that was tight. Let me get us back on the radio. Okay, everybody, we're back. This is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. We're talking about joint biomechanics and why you might have trouble with your shoulders, or you might have trouble with your neck, your shoulders, your elbow, or your hips. And we're going to talk about your knees as well and your feet. But if we just look at all your flexor muscles that are on the front of your body above your waist, and we just break down the SCM, the pec, the bicep, the forearm, the psoas. Now we've covered the neck, the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist, and the hip joint. Well, my hip just doesn't, it's not functioning properly. My hip's not working properly. Okay, could I possibly have a hip joint problem because I have a tight psoas? And the answer to that question is yes. And if the answer to that question is yes, which my studies tell me that's true, then what would cause a tight psoas? And let me just tell you that one of the things that can cause a tight psoas is a weak or dampened frontal lobe. Upper brain weakness, motor cortex, upper brain weakness has inhibitory effects on flexor muscles ipsilaterally on the same side. Muscle, upper brain that's not firing properly will not turn off a flexor muscle, which will cause a flexor muscle to be tight. And if a flexor muscle is tight, you'll get a lateral bend in your lumbar spine towards the tight flexor muscle. If that psoas is tight on the left, you'll get, or on the right, they're looking back at us. If that psoas is tight on the right, you'll get a flexion of your lumbar spine to that side. It's one of the neurological tools that I use in the evaluation process of a patient. That's why I take an A to P lumbar film on patients, because that gives me information about neurology. It gives me information about how the brain is functioned by looking at an A to P lumbar film. Now that's not common, I promise you, because we didn't talk about it in chiropractic school. And we went through films, and a radiologist, I've told you guys this before, a chiropractic radiologist is as smart as any other radiologist ever in the world. Those guys test just as high as medical radiologists when they go head to head. So we get taught a lot about X-ray when we're in school. And I can tell you, I don't remember that conversation ever happening. Talking about a lateral bend of a lumbar spine being related to a tight psoas, which is related to a deficient frontal lobe on that side. Now, if that was happening, could it be possible that you might search the world over to try to figure out why you have hip pain? And you will go to medical doctors, and you will go to a physical therapist, and you will go to a massage therapist, and you will go to acupuncturists, and you'll go to all of these people trying to figure out why you have hip pain, and nobody can figure out why you have hip pain, and everybody's looking at your hip, and nobody's looking at your brain. I promise you, that's a common experience in the world we live in today. And I want you to see why. I want you to understand it and really see it. I'll blow that up a little bit. I want you to see why. Because that psoas muscle is coming down, attaching. It's crossing the joint. It's attaching to the inside of that femur. And it has to do with the biomechanics of that whole pelvis and how the lumbar spine, the pelvis, and the hip joint are functioning. And the same thing is going on up here when we're talking about the pec muscle. Just take your hand and put it on your chest. Just cross your arm. Take your right arm and cross it and put it on your chest, like you're saying the Pledge of Allegiance, but just move up towards your shoulder just a little bit. You guys remember that Pledge of Allegiance, right? Yeah, that's back in the good old days. So that pec muscle right there, that pec muscle is attached to that humerus, your arm bone, but it's also attached all the way across your sternum, down underneath your pec, your breast, down underneath that, and it comes back up and it attaches to that humerus. Now, what happens if you get a tight pec muscle? If you get a tight pec muscle, you will get internal rotation of your shoulder joint. An internal rotation of your shoulder joint is going to change the way the range of motion that your shoulder is capable of doing. Here's a test you can do at home. If you're sitting at home and you're not driving down the road, if you're able to do this, just put your arms down by your side with your palms forward. Put your arms down by your side with your palms forward. Now, raise your arms above your head and touch your hands above your head. And where I can't do it because I got these headphones on, I'm smashing my headphones. But when you touch your hands together, now just look up and see where your hands are. And I'll show you what I see a lot. What I see a lot in my office is this. If you raise your hands up and touch your hands together and then look up and see where your hands are your hands in front of your head? Are they out in front of your body? If they're out in front of your body, then you can be guaranteed that part of the reason that that's happening is because your pecs are tight and your shoulders are rolled forward, and the shoulder blade has an internal rotation. The bottom tip of the shoulder blade, see if I think I got a picture of that. Some of these aren't. Let me just flip through it right here. So the bottom tip of that shoulder blade is whenever you raise your arm up, the bottom tip of that shoulder blade should move out. It should move out and allow for the arm to come all the way up. But if your pec muscle is tight, then your shoulder is going to roll forward, and it has a tendency of changing the angle of the way that shoulder, the tip of the shoulder blade, and what ends up happening is it tends to move towards the spine. The bottom tip of your shoulder blade on the back of your body, when your shoulders roll forward, tends to change its orientation to where the tip moves more, which is closing down this hard bony point right here on your shoulder. It's closing that down on your humerus, right on top of that supraspinatus tendon. And that right there is going to move. It's as soon as you raise your arm and that shoulder blade's not moving, and not only is it not moving, it's internally rotated just a little bit because you got this forward head posture, which is due to tight SCM muscles, and then are partly tight to SCM muscles. It's partly due to that. And then we got tight pecs, and our shoulders are rolled forward, our head's forward, our shoulders are rolled forward, and then here we go. We've got a change of the interface. We have a change of interface of the humerus and the scapula, the shoulder blade, which now causes the joint to move through a range of motion that the joint is not, number one, neurologically sound with. You don't have the proper nerve flow to it. Why? Because you don't have inhibition of flexors and extensors the way you're supposed to have them, because you've got a brain that's not firing the way that it's supposed to. That's one of the things of the way that works. So we want to make sure that we've got proper brain function so that we can inhibit these flexor muscles above our waist. Okay? It will change the shoulder, it will change the elbow, it will change the wrist, it will change the neck biomechanics, and it will change the hip biomechanics. And your hip joint might not function properly. Then you take that joint through a range of motion under a load, and now you tear something. I tore the ligament in my hip. Oh man, I need a hip replacement. Oh man, why? Where should we start? Should we start in the hip or should we start in the brain? And I'm presenting that we should start in the brain. Now let's talk about the bottom part of the body, because they're on the back. It's the hamstring, it's the calf, it's the bottom of the foot. So what happened? I could tell. I didn't even have to ask. I did ask, but I didn't have to ask, because if I was going to guess, I would have said it was her right Achilles tendon that was pulling on that bone. She said, "Oh man, I think I'm developing a heel spur." I had to go to the doctor. He told me I bet I was developing a heel spur. I said, "Well, which foot's it on?" And I was thinking to myself, "It's on your right foot." I didn't even look at her legs, but I could already tell it was on her right foot. Why? Why would I have guessed her right foot? Because her right brain. Her right brain not firing properly. Her right side flexor muscles are tight. Yeah, that calf, that hamstring and the calf. So the hamstring is the back of your leg above your knee. If that's tight, you'll have a hard time leaning over and touching the ground. You'll have a hard time picking your legs up. People do it all the time. I'll reach down and because there's an orthopedic test that tests for a disc bulge, and then that orthopedic test that tests for the disc bulge, we raise that leg up, and they're like, "Oh man, I need to stretch more. My hamstrings are tight." And I'm like, "You need to walk more because your brain's not firing." Right? So the hamstring is going to change not only on the top side of the hamstring, because if you follow the hamstring up, it will attach right up underneath the bottom of your glute. And it attaches to the bottom of your pelvis. And that attachment point, you can just imagine if I anchor that thing down and that hamstring is tight, I lose flexibility in my lumbar spine. I lose flexibility in my pelvis. One of my guys came in today and I said, "How's it going?" He said, I'm stiff right here and right here. And he pointed right to his SI joint on the right side, the top of it, and then down almost in the middle of the glute on the bottom of it. And he's like, "It hurts right here and it hurts right here." And I said, "What have you been doing?" And he said, "Nothing. Just traveling a little bit." And I was like, "Well, that's the tough thing about being a human being and the world we live in today. It's not really conducive to sacral joint motion. The things that the way that the way that our sacrum is supposed to move is not necessarily the way that it's moving because we've lost the ability to squat. We've lost the ability. Look at little kids who can squat down. There's no question that the way that they can squat is completely different than the way that adults can squat. We don't have the nerve supply, and we don't have the tissue integrity to be able to move through those range of motions properly, and it puts a lot of pressure on our SI joint, our sacroiliac, which is right there, basically at the base of your skull, right in the midline. That's your sacrum, and your lumbar spine comes up. So tight hamstrings will affect your sacroiliac joint. Tight hamstrings will affect your lumbar spine movement. You can have increased chances of bulging disc because those two things are happening. Now, let's think about this for a second. Let's just use the right side. If my right side brain's not firing, my right side flexor muscles are tight, which means my right side psoas is tight and my right side hamstring is tight. So I'm going to lean into my lumbar spine is going to bend to the right side, have a slight little bend to the right side because I've got that tight psoas on that side. And now I'm going to anchor down the hamstring on the same side so that it takes all the slack out of the pelvis. So now I've got the lumbar spine involved and I've got the pelvis involved, and I'm not moving through the proper ranges of motion. And now I'm going to lift the couch. I gotta lift a couch. I gotta lift a box. I gotta lift those heavy boxes off of the front porch that Amazon delivers all the time. Yep, I gotta lift a case of water. I gotta whatever your thing is that you're lifting, right? But I don't have proper tone in my psoas muscle on the right side and my hamstring muscle on the right side. And so there goes my low back, and now we're in trouble. Now, let's go to the bottom end of the hamstring. So take your hand, run it down the back of your leg until it hits the top of your knee. Now your hamstring is going to split. It's going to split, and it's going to wrap around on the inside of your knee, and it's going to attach to the tibia on this little spot called the pes anserine, little flat spot right on the inside of below your knee. That's where one part of the hamstring comes in, and then the other hamstring comes down and attaches on the lateral side. So that hamstring runs right in the middle of your your femur, and then it splits going down the back side. So now we're crossing onto the tibia, so now the knee joint's in play. So what do we say about knee joints? Knee joints are like obedient children. They do what they're told. Most of the time, if you're having a knee problem, it's because something else is going on and telling that knee to move through a range of motion that's not proper. It'll put pressure on that meniscus. It'll put pressure on the whole knee joint itself. It will create inflammation in the knee joint because that hamstring is not firing properly. And the hamstring and the quad are working together. So we've got that reciprocal inhibition. So now we've got a tight right hamstring. The backside of your leg is tight because your brain hasn't turned it off. And because your hamstring is tight, your quad is now weak. So leg extension becomes weak. Getting up off the ground becomes harder to do because you can't press. You can't put your foot off the ground. You can't put your foot down and stand up and press down with your thigh. And part of the reason you can't is because the thigh is inhibited because the hamstring is tight, because the hamstring is in flexion. And we've got that reciprocal inhibition. Reciprocal inhibition means just like my bicep. If my bicep is in contraction, my tricep is soft. If my tricep is in contraction, my bicep is soft. Those two things neurologically work together in order to move my elbow joint. If they're not moving properly, if that's not working neurologically, then my elbow joint can't move like it's supposed to. And what I see a lot of times on the quad, on the front side of the leg, is as I see it pulling, like the quad is really not a quad. I think we've decided it's like 13 muscles. And I could break that down for you if you want me to. But the inside and the outside, and that's the torque that's going on the kneecap, chondromalacia patella. You ever heard that one? You guys, if you ever had knee pain, you might have looked that up. You pull that kneecap across that little tibial ridge, and now all of a sudden it starts grinding off the back of that kneecap, and you get little bone flakes in there, and you get that. It's kind of like sandpaper, trying to sand it down a little bit. It'll just take that, wear that back of that kneecap off, and it's because we've got pulling one way or the other that's going on that knee from that quad because that quad's not firing properly. And maybe that quad's not firing properly because that hamstring's tight, and maybe that hamstring's tight because that brain's not working. Yeah, that's a thing. And I'm going to get to one right now. Here's one because this is the bottom of the foot. So now you come down the calf, you bring the calf down to the Achilles. The Achilles attaches to the calcaneus. The calcaneus now is the heel bone. Now get up underneath the foot and get into what we call dorsiflexion of the foot, where the toes are going downward. How many of you have heard of or have dealt with plantar fasciitis? Plantar fasciitis we talked about that a week or two ago, is the inflammation of the plantar fascia, the plantar aponeurosis, right? When what's it caused from? It's caused from abnormal biomechanics of the foot, but it also could be caused from abnormal brain. That's all. That's the one thing I really want to push home, is it being caused from abnormal brain. And then, if you guys remember this slide, it's been a while since I showed it to you, but remember that when you're born, you can see about 9 inches away from your mom's face because you're looking for face and food supply, and that's it. It's really the only thing you can do. Your eyes are down and in. And then about 3 months, you get tired of laying on your back and you roll over to your tummy. And when you roll over to your tummy, you get your eyes up. And getting your eyes up fires your brain properly to turn off your flexor muscles. Because if you fast forward, you crawl and then you walk and then you walk and then you start to get a breakdown right here. And I don't know. That's not what I meant to do. I don't know how to make that bigger for you without me kind of being in the way. But we're looking at a picture of an old guy, and he's carrying a cane, and he's bent forward at the waist, and he's bent at the knee, and his heel's not on the ground, and his head is way forward, and his head is way over his hips. And this whole thing, his shoulders are rolled forward, his head is forward, his hips are tight, his knee is tight, his foot is tight. What happened to this old man? What happened to him? In one sense, he's moving, and in the other sense, he's not moving. And so, what happened? Well, what happened was he lost his frontal lobe. That's what happened. So that's kind of the where I got it. I'm not really finished. There's a movement. One of the things you can do. Here's an exercise that you can do. You can lay down on your stomach, and then try to pick your head up and look at the wall that's in front of you. Don't look at the ground, but look at the wall that's in front of you. So just raise your head up, but you got to be laying on your stomach. And it's better if you can do it without your hands. If you don't use your hands at all, just put your hands out to the side or put your hands back behind you and just see if you can lay and bring your head up and try to raise the front part of your chest or your shoulders up off the ground. And then do that 8 times. And work on firing those extensors. Like raise that up and do that 8 times. See if you can make and get your eyes up as much as you can. See if you can raise your eyes up almost to the ceiling in front of you. That's a good exercise to do. And then once you can raise your head up to the wall, then raise your chest up, and then you can eventually get to the point where you raise your head and chest up and your feet off the ground. Now, that is an advanced move. Might take a little while, but that first part of just raising your head up will really start to fire, and it'll get your it'll start to work on your extensors, and it'll start to turn off your flexors, and it will start to bring your posture back up because it's really getting your brain going. And that would really help in the way that your shoulders function. Check your shoulders. Check yourself. I spend all my time forward. I need to work on this myself. Check ourselves because I'm always adjusting and I'm looking down and my hands are down, and I do that all day long. So I got to be able to get myself back up. Got to be able to get my head up. I got to get my shoulders up, or I run the risk of increasing the chance of injuring my shoulder because I take it through a range of motion that's not normal, that doesn't have fitness, and I don't have the proper nerve supply in that manner. I got to get my shoulders up. You got to get your shoulders up. Got to get your shoulders back and open. Get your shoulders back and open. One of the things you can do is overhead touches. Just bring your hands and try to reach as high as you can and touch your hands together. That's an overhead touch. Another thing you can do, we do this every single day in the office. Showed you this plenty of times on the show. Look out in front of you, put your eyeballs on your thumbnail, get your thumbnail up at a 45-degree angle, and take yourself and move and fire your SCM on the opposite side of your thumb. But my eyes are going to follow my thumb, and I'm going to fire that SCM. And I'm going to move it, and I'm going to fire it. I need to do that some more myself today. I can feel the stiffness in my neck. I can feel the stiffness in my shoulders. I'm going to kind of try to keep my shoulders straight when I'm going through that movement. And then the next thing you can do is just step sideways. Take 3 steps to the left. Take 3 steps to the right. Take 3 steps to the left. Keep your eyes facing forward. Please be careful. Don't hurt yourself. Don't fall. Be in a safe position. That'll help your brain, and it'll also help all of your joints. Hey, we didn't get to neurofeedback, but we will. We'll do it on Wednesday. So you guys come back and see us on Wednesday. Tomorrow night, we'll be talking at the WISE group. Hey, if you want to go, get a hold of Laura Landis over there at the Lake Ridge Memorial Designers. She'll get you set up, and you can join the club. It's a really cool deal. Lots of older folks, and they're there to learn stuff. And they like the social life. Well, guys, you guys have a great night. We'll talk to you again on Wednesday.